right, our next guest is Moisés Moreno-Rivera, who was appointed to the California Environmental Protection Agency as Deputy Secretary for Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Water Relations in February of this year, 2023. Moy, that's what he goes by, had previously served as Assistant Secretary for Equity and Environmental Justice at the California Natural Resources Agency since 2021. He held several roles at the State Water Resource Board Control between 2018 and 2021, including Assistant Tribal Liaison and Environmental Justice Specialist. Moy was Central Coast Program Coordinator at the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water from 2017 to 2018. He was a graduate assistant for multicultural and diversity affairs at the University of Florida from 2015 to 2017. Moy is a member of Water Solution Network, Cal Bears in the Desert, and Golden Key International Honor Society. He earned a Master's of Arts in Latin American Studies from the University of Florida. So without further ado, I welcome you back, Moy, to SDAC. And again, we're happy to have you here. The floor is yours, sir.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. It's always so interesting when you're being read your resume back to you. I just kind of like to introduce myself as Moy and a humble servant of the people of the state of California. So I appreciate the invitation being here with you today. I was asked to provide a little background and overview of CalEPA's Affinity Group's program and the impact that has had across our agency and the impact it has had in other agencies and departments. And boy, can I just say that I'm very, very excited to be in this role because that program was launched when I was a staffer within the State Water Resources Control Board within this agency. So in many ways, it's a full circle moment to be able to talk about a program that I helped launch along with my colleagues here several years ago. So I'm gonna share my screen a little bit just so that we have some framing. But before I do that, I do want to talk about staff resilience, staff leadership, and building communities in the workplace. When I joined the Environmental Protection Agency, I was new to Sacramento. I was new to the agency, new to government. I had never been to the city prior to me working within CalEPA, and the opportunity to work with others or to build community seemed that much more daunting, being in a massive building and not knowing who to contact or connect with. Thankfully, however, I learned very quickly that there had been staff trying to build community for a very long time, particularly within the LGBTQIA plus community, and had faced several challenges in being able to do that, on whether, agreement on using staff time and resources, agreement as to being able to post things on the break rooms, the ability to have programming, having leadership buy into it. And for many years, the staff had experienced challenges. And at some point, there was a question as to, is this the culture of belonging that the state is moving towards? If we're hearing that we have an administration that wants a California for all, what does that mean for us on a day-to-day? And there was a number of staff that that came together, and in the coming together, we're able to work with the Office of the Secretary within CalEPA to identify what can we do, what are our options, right? What are our options, right? We have, there's disability advisory councils that are within government code, and those are established in legislation. How do we leverage that existing system to provide a community for everyone else? And when I mean everyone else is the intersections of the disability of the disabled community, right? When you share multiple identities, how do those intersections bring out visibility? And what I mean by this is me being an openly gay Latino male, by being able to either have the option to either be within a community for Latinos, or being in a community in the LGBTQIA community, and having that option and having those choices is extremely important to not succumb people to a specific group or identity. So in speaking with leadership, we identified that we wanted to establish something similar to the federal programs for employee resource groups. That US EPA and the federal government had developed these programs that accounted for leadership, that allowed for leadership opportunities, that allocated staff time, that provided staff the resources in order for them to build community. However, we have this thing in the state called Prop 209. So we had to navigate, what does it mean to build community in navigating California's laws and regulations. And we were able to work with a staff that represented a number of different groups, whether it was administrative groups, whether it was an EEO officers, HR attorneys, HR representatives, union stewards. We were able to work with leadership. We were able to work with folks like myself that don't have any of those backgrounds, that just wanted to build community. And together with executive leadership, we drafted a charter of what an affinity groups program we envisioned. One that allowed for not only inclusivity, but have staff input across the board as to the events that are taking place, how groups get formed, how groups, the outreach that executive leadership does, how we do that in a meaningful way to raise not only awareness, but build community. And in this process of building community within our agency, we found it extremely meaningful that this needed to be front and center for all and available for all staff, right? And this is our internal intranet page, where at the top, we have the program readily accessible for any of our boards, department, and office within the CalEPA umbrella, that really outlines what this is, who's it for, the charter itself for folks being able to understand why this is important, how you can apply to be a part of a group, your orientation package, right? How do you, the reason why we have these, the purposes of the program. And we wanted to make sure that staff across the agency had a piece of what we were trying to envision of this building community. Now, since the inception of these programs, other agencies have asked, where are those resources? How can we build and how can we collaborate with staff? How do we build a program like this that is a very bottom-up approach, that it wasn't a top-down, but rather bottom-up of staff just wanting to build community. And yes, I can gladly share the charter with you. And when I went to the resources agency, this was an end product that I had worked on with a number of staff here, including members of CalEPA's Disability Advisory Council Committee. And took that to the resources agency, and one of our departments was able to establish their affinity groups program within months of receiving the resources and being able to integrate that. And it was really, really heartwarming to see and hear their feedback when they shared with us that the legwork had been done, the barriers had been broken, that we had consulted with bargaining units, we had consulted with CalHR, we had essentially broken down a barrier of how we build inclusive workspaces and have groups and have a program that really has the interest of staff and of course leadership in building community within an agency. Now, in speaking with Bobby prior to this, I think the next step of this is how do we integrate this and how do we operationalize this moving forward? And now that I get to be in this role is get to reconnect with the staff that helped build this program and others, of course, to see how we actually make sure that this is part of onboarding communications, that when folks are going about recruitment, that programs like this are highlighted, making sure that it's not static. So I want to leave you with that, but I'm just excited to be back and to be able to reconnect with these folks that have organized events, have continued to build community, and I'm just really looking forward to not only doing that within CalEPA, but really breaking down silos in other agencies and departments. So we're happy to be a resource. And I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Moy. That's a lot of good work you did with the agency, and you continue to do that. There is a question. This is great. I am a CalHR DEI office, and we are launching a similar project to stand up an employee impact group, EIG, for CalHR as well as scale departments. Would love to review what you have all developed and as well as connect with you to learn more. So this is from Serena Kerrigan. Serena, thank you for the question, and I'll let Moy respond to that.
Yeah, Serena, happy to connect with you and happy to sit down with you. You know, the package, I know when we developed it, we wanted to make sure that this was complying with all of existing government code, of course, and consistent with our CalHR mandates, our EEO mandates, bargaining units mandates. We wanted to make sure that in building community, we weren't that we essentially covered all of our bases, because our ultimate goal was folks are here 40 hours a week, or when we were in the building, right? You long to be seen, you long to be accepted. If you're new to the area, just like I was, not knowing who to connect with, building community, it was very daunting. It was very, very daunting. And not being here, and I wasn't alone in this process, right? I wasn't alone in this feeling. And so we wanted to build a program that was gonna be sustainable, because if you look at it from the other side, right? What happens if we don't build a sustainable program? And this is just a one-off. Right, what happens when you don't do that? Then it undermines exactly what the program that we were trying to build. So as for the sustainability of these groups in the application process and the development of these groups, we have executive sponsors. So either the board chairs or board directors of the boards, departments, and office within CalEPA have touch points with staff. They're integrated into broader agency conversations. The advisory groups help leadership with accountability and responsiveness to the groups and removing barriers, so that they have adequate programming and are supported in programming. There's applications for supervisors, so we want to make sure that supervisors are aware of providing the space, and if there's any opportunities for to inform managers of why this is important and how this was approved by their leadership. It's one of those things that we're willing and open to have those conversations. This is, so providing you the link, this is an intranet page. So if I give you the link, you won't be able to see it unless you're within the CalEPA server. So if you're a CalEPA employee, you're more than welcome to see this. I could share it with you. However, you won't be able to open it. That's the dilemma.
So, Moy, to overcome that dilemma, is there a way that possibly you can print out maybe a PDF or a screenshot or something that you can give it to me, and I'm going to share that with the group? Because obviously this is an excellent program, and why reinvent the wheel when you've already done all the hard work that many other departments who are willing to follow your footstep could do the same simply by following what you have done. And in that regard, what are the challenges that you encountered when you try to do this program, roll this Affinity group program out for the whole agency?
I think education was probably the biggest challenge, right? One of those things where, and we keep on hearing this question of our agency or our department is ratepayer based or certificate or permitting based. So we can only charge to a specific project or program. We can only, whatever fees we acquire is what pays for our salary. And there was a lot of educating that took place with that, where it came to the point of like, well, in your duty statement, you also have opportunities and as part of CalHR for career pathways and upward mobility. And folks are always assigned to projects that allow for them to go up to another classification, right? And that there's an understanding that there's a few hours within your month that give you that discretion to go to a training, that give you that discretion to go to a workshop, right? And that what we were asking is, well, if we allow for that discretion, and as part of bargaining units and as part of CalHR's mandates of upward mobility and building community, right? How are we navigating those spaces and navigating that time where building community is also about employee job satisfaction, and it allows for folks to feel comfortable in their workplace, and allows for folks to break down silos and encourages them to actually enjoy what they do, right? And we realized that that was more important to us as we're thinking about our fight against climate change, right? We want folks that are invested, and we can't have a community that's not welcoming, and then asking folks, please care about what we care about in the policy area. However, you as an employee, we're going to put those things to the side. Those things are not mutually exclusive, and we need to work towards a more inclusive workspace.
That's a great response. Thank you for clarifying that. Another question we have, can you elaborate on how EPA decides to set priorities on the ideas, recommendations that result from the affinity groups? At CPUC, we are beginning to ask a different employee resource group, what are your priorities, so we can see where we are similarly or similarly situated and can join forces with other groups to have power in numbers. But we realize that DACs may have a different goals and objectives than some of the ERGs. And I want to partially respond to that. DACs don't have different goals. We also want to be inclusive and want to absorb as many different affinity groups that wish to join or be part of DAC, or DAC want to be part of that affinity group. But I'm going to let Moy respond to this question.
I think, Joyce, one of the things that was really helpful in the developing of this program is that from the get-go, we had a broad understanding that we knew that for certain elements in the workplace, if you're experiencing harassment, if you're experiencing discrimination, that there's proper avenues to go through, right? And that if you're discriminated for in an interview panel, et cetera, that there's community, that there's processes in place for employees to work through. What we had envisioned was what happens, and this happened to me when I was in the Office of Multicultural and Diversity Affairs at the University of Florida. What happens when your students, you get a phone call and you have a student whose brother or whose family member was killed in a shooting at the Pulse nightclub, and then you have to, who do you go to in the workplace? Is you can't go to your you can't go to HR, you can't go to EEO officer. You want to be in community with folks, right? You want to be able to be in a place where you feel comfortable, that there's resources for you, that there's an understanding that what we're trying to do is raise awareness, build consciousness, educate, train, so that other folks have an opportunity to an invitation to learn more, and as a result, be able to be more mindful of and have situational awareness. So when we were building out the program, there was a reason why we had DAC members as part of this. It was a reason why we had 8 CalHR, EEO officers, folks like myself that didn't have any of those backgrounds, right? That we had built a program that knew what this was and what this wasn't, right? And that the discrimination that we had felt, that how do we put that in a way of building community of what the programs should be and shouldn't be. And that's very clearly outlined in the charter. Happy to send that information to you, where now when we're talking about priorities and how we're building our next steps is as part of that vision of what the purpose of this is, rather than understanding of like, we're not bargaining units, right? There's a process for that. However, if we're finding themes, and as we're building community, we're finding themes, being able to raise that is important. Being able to highlight that is important. Bringing it up to leadership is important. But it was that understanding of like, what is this, where does this exist within the operations process of it? And that building community is also about raising awareness.
I hope that answers the question that Joyce Steingass asked, and I thank you so much for that response. Let's see. Something about, you set the stage by making a purpose and confine to it what is or what's not intended, a vision statement, a rule of engagement, and I think these are statements that's been made, which you just repeated in your remarks. There, somebody has their hand up. Meredith, would you like to unmute and ask question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Moy, for joining us. Our department is trying to build a more robust DEI&A program, and I think we're lacking the perspective and membership in our small leadership group of folks who identify as LGBTQ+. How can we, in this remote environment, reach out to folks respectfully and with tact to see if anyone's willing and interested to join our group, and willing to share their unique and important perspective and life experience with us and help us to build an inclusive program? Because I feel like without someone or more people in the leadership group who can bring that perspective to our program, it just won't it won't tick all the boxes that we're looking for. And
Yeah, so that's a really good question about how do we do it in a way that's intentional that's not tokenizing. These groups and affinity groups are volunteer based, right? So folks volunteer that information to us, and we actually sent out surveys, confidential surveys, and surveys to assess, one, if there was a need for us to even establish this program. Right? We in the LGBTQIA community within the agency wanted to build community. Did others? Right? We knew that there was a group of 6 or 7 of us that wanted to build community. This is an agency of 6,000, right? So we wanted to make sure that we weren't operating in a vacuum. So we sent out surveys to folks asking the question of, one, are you even interested for us to build some sort of program? We brought in US EPA for a brown bag conversation so that they would tell us about their program. And then we invited all staff to that brown bag for that learning opportunity. So Meredith, what we did at first was set the stage to what was later going to become the Affinity Groups program. We wanted to build an understanding of what these things are, how, and we started normalizing the conversation so that when it came to us working on this, there was an understanding in staff and leadership that we were going towards a collective goal. Now, to your point is, how do you email folks and how do you, make sure that folks are aware that they're wanting to participate? One is, not all members of the LGBTQIA 2S+ community want to be in an affinity group. Not everyone wants to participate. However, every time when we did host events, we did have a voluntary sign-up form. And if folks wanted to get further information, and we had office hours where folks could just connect with us. And we did that, and we try to normalize that component. In all staff meetings or in leadership meetings, we engage with executive leadership for them to talk about the program rather than for us to talk about the program. And in doing so, folks opened up, and we hosted a big event at the Water Board in 2019, and folks showed up that we didn't even have on our list or hadn't been invited. They showed up because they wanted to see for themselves as, is this for real? Is this actually happening? And afterwards, they're like, okay, I guess this is something that I could join. I guess this is something that I want to be a part of, but it took time. So I can't give you a very prescriptive answer as to do this and, build this and they will come. Rather, normalize, have patience, and we can kind of go from there. Does that answer your question, Meredith?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It got my brain. I'm thinking about events now, and I'm thinking about the whole idea of normalizing things so it's not abrupt. It probably doesn't help too that I'm pretty new to this organization, not to the state necessarily, but yeah, no, that was extremely helpful. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. Next question, we have somebody, Lisa, have her hands up. Would you unmute and ask your question?
Mine is more just a comment. My agency we're doing something similar that CalEPA is doing. We have various community groups within our agency. And actually, one of our oldest groups started right after the Floyd incident. We are an inclusive office. We are trying to be more inclusive. We are trying to be more aware of people's feelings. We are trying to take everybody's priorities and how they work within the agency, not just from higher management down to low, but we built our different committees from the bottom up, like you guys did, not from management. They came from the lower classes up, speaking up on what they saw, what was going on in the office, and how the office needed to change. And more recently, we have come up with a strategic plan for our agency. And it was all volunteer, and we do, we send out, I'm losing my thought right now, but we send out stuff to our staff and to ask if they want to participate like you do. We do surveys to our staff, you know, if they want to be included on any of these committees and stuff like that. And with our strategic planning committee, what we did first was establish our agency's mission, what our common values are going to be, our mission statement. And I just want to say, in some of these agencies, you might want to look at what is the mission of your agency. What do you want to see your agency, you know, how do you want to see it come out? How do you want to see it perceived in the public eye? So that's just my little spiel, and what we're doing here at my agency is we're kind of doing what you guys are doing, just a little differently. But yeah, and I see a lot of other agencies that are really trying to do this to be more inclusive with all. And see, I'm our DAC chair, so DAC is part of all of this, all of these communities. And Bobby brought this up because another person said, oh, DAC has different parties. No, we don't. I am a disabled Black female, so I'm in 3 groups. So DAC is part of all of these other groups, you know, the gay community, our Black and brown community. We're in all of those. And that's what, me personally, I think a lot of state agencies need to look at. We're here, see us, because we're just as valuable as everybody else. So thank you.
You know, Lisa, those are very valid points. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for your leadership. But first, thanks for your humanity. First, before any of those things, you know, it's extremely important that we value who we are as people before we value the output that we have, and the efforts of building community. Sometimes we also tend to forget that those efforts. And you're totally right. The disabled community intersects across the board, right? And this is one of those reasons why I think it's extremely important that we have these conversations and we normalize these conversations outside of this space, right? You all get to meet on a monthly basis, and it's also, or on a quarterly basis, and have these conversations. It's also as important to normalize this outside of it, right? And then it's not just about when is Pride Month to talk about the LGBTQIA community, right? When is, you know, Disability Awareness Month for staff, and how, you know, limiting these conversations to a month when we live this every day is not necessarily a culture that we want to foment, particularly in any places that I want to work, and for, you know, and the experiences that other folks have. So the idea of this group of being able to exist, it was on a day-to-day was extremely important. And to your point of like, what is the broader agency mission, right? This was parallel, and this was part of our overall racial equity work at CalEPA, right? When we were launching a racial equity action plan and part of the government alliance on race and equity that eventually became CORE, the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, when all of those programs were taking in place, it's like, well, these are bold actions and bold moves about our investments, about our recruitment, our retention, right? Those are bold things that we're doing across the board. However, what happens on a day-to-day, and how staff feel on a day-to-day to even do that work? And that's the purpose of what we were trying to build here, that as the agency was developing in its vision statement for racial equity, as the agency was doing this broader work, right, that we acknowledged that on the day-to-day, there was also an opportunity to build community, so that we could have a place to just be ourselves and not have to push policy, and then we could just celebrate who we are.
Thank you for responding to Lisa's question. And Lisa, I appreciate very much you bringing up the point that I have reinforced here at SDAC that we are part of the affinity group, and all affinity groups we are part of and immersive to all the other environments. We're not separate by any means. And Moy just pointed out the fact that disability can happen within any affinity groups. So we are happy to be part of that inclusive environment. And that's the message we try to convey over and over again. I do have a question for you, Moy. One of the things that you mentioned and the team that came across, how do you establish these affinity groups? Well, you started out by saying, having leadership sponsor it. You started out, you mentioned surveys. All of these are good ideas. Important thing that we oftentimes encounter, how do we get that leader, the ambassador, to actually talk about this and bring it up front to the rest of the organization? I know you briefly chatted about education, but apart from the education, I know that DEI is part of an executive order that was established by the governor recently or last year sometime, but yet that message is not permeating within the leadership structure of many departments. How did you overcome that barrier, and what message would you share with us that we can follow to deal with that problem?
It's a really good question. As I shared before, it was prior to me joining the water board back in 2018, there had been years of organizing, of trying to build community. So by the time that I came on board, and I was able to organize the agency's first ever Pride Month celebrations, the question came to be, like, how did you get leadership to do it? How did you do it? And I was like, I just sent an email. And I was new to the state. I didn't know what the hierarchy processes were. I didn't know that I had to go through the proper channels. And I just sent an email, and I still have a copy of that email. I'm new to the state. I'm gay, and Pride Month is happening in a month or so. What are we doing? That was the question that I asked. And the response was, we don't know, let's see. And it made it out of the way to the board chair, and the board chair was like, can you lead our agency's efforts for Pride Month celebrations? Let me put you in contact with our Office of Public Affairs. Let me put you in contact, with these other colleagues, and make it happen, and connect with the people that have been trying to build community for the past 3 years, because we know who they are. It was an email. And while I was also very fortunate that there was leadership that responded nicely to that email, I also found it that sometimes we also in our heads put our own barriers up. They might say no, they may not support it. And that actually did happen after we celebrated. Then staff came over and they said, we've been trying to do that for many years, and we had never gotten the response that you got. How do we work together? Because we're experiencing this. And it took about 18 months to get into a space of we're now going to do this. And it was constant meetings, being persistent. Quite frankly, sometimes after work, we would go to meet and happy hour and honestly cry of the responses that we would get from leadership. But we had each other. And after 18 months, we got the response that we were seeking, right? It wasn't all nice and easy, but we had each other. And I think that was the most I still bond with these folks. We build strong communities with each other because we went through that process together.
Thank you so much. So you had a community that you got support from, notwithstanding the barriers that you faced that made you cry sometimes because of the responses and the persistence, right? You did this for 18 months and you didn't take, the negative response. That didn't really stop you. You kept on trying. So that's very admirable. And it's a good lesson for us to hear and learn from this experience. It takes efforts, but never give up. Anyway.
What I will say now, Bobby, is that we've established this program, we broke down those barriers, and now we hope that we could share this so that folks don't have to go through that, because that is not, that is not the government that I want to work for, right? I want to work for an inclusive government. We have a long way to go. So as we're breaking down these barriers, we need to share this information with others so that we could collectively uplift each other. I think that was the broader message that I wanted to share.
And that's exactly why you were invited to SDAC, to share that important message. And you've done an eloquent job of doing that. So Moy, thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for Moy before I say goodbye to him? If not, Moy, thank you so much. Please, you're welcome to come back to SDAC and share. And meanwhile, we look forward to any bylaws or any of the screenshots or web pages or anything that you can share with us. And you're welcome to stay on and listen to the other speakers. Otherwise, I wish you a wonderful day. And thanks again for coming to SDAC.
Thank you so much, Bobby. I do have a 10 o'clock. And again, thank you all so much. Thank you for all the work that you do, and happy to be a resource. And I'll make sure to send you that information, Bobby. Great.
Thank you. Have a good one. Well, that was Moy. He was fantastic, provided a lot of useful information.